Hello and welcome, everyone. We're back with the interview series of Illusion Horror and Con, partnering with Helmgast, where we bring the creative voices behind the Cult Divinity Lost Kickstarter, Dark Realms, and other horrors. And if you're interested in this campaign, it is still live. It will only close on the end of the month, on February 28th at 6 p.m. Central European Time. And so, if you haven't done so, I would suggest you pledge for that Kickstarter today. If not, then maybe Torsten Gatu will give us a bit of more insight of why you should do so nonetheless. I'm David. My wife Crystal, we are two-thirds of the Illusion Horror and Con team, and today we're speaking with Torsten Gatu. Thank you very much for agreeing to talk with us, and maybe
Yes,
you
thank
can
you.
give us a bit of an insight. Who is Torsten and what do you do?
Sure. Thank you, David, and thank you, Crystal. It's very nice to be here. Yes, my writing for Cult goes back maybe at this point 6 years or so, 6 or 7 years, from which time I contacted Petter, who is the creative director for Cult, and asked him to write. And at that point, he had a lot of stuff already in the pipeline. A lot of that stuff has since, seen the light of day in other Kickstarters. Because there's never a shortage of material, really. The shortage is really time when it comes to the world of Cult, unfortunately. So so it's been a long journey of writing since then, basically off and on for the last maybe 6 or 7 years. So, but my interest in Cult goes back way further than that. I bought the first edition when it came out here in Sweden. And that was in early 90s. So I was maybe 11 or 12 years old, which is way too young to start playing Cult, obviously. So it was hard. Yes, it felt very nice.
Naughty, naughty.
Exactly, yes. Because actually on the box it said for ages 15 and up.
Hmm. I
So it,
think
it really felt
I think
like
Petter
something.
also said that he acquired the box before he was of age initially.
Yeah. I think many people did, and many people struggled with playing it at that time. But it's I think even though maybe we struggled to play it the way it should be played back then, um, just reading it was mind blowing. I mean, the depth and the richness of the mythology and the Gnostic background was, unlike anything at that time. So that kind of stayed with me for the rest of my life, I think, in many ways. So it has been a recurring inspiration, actually, in many ways.
Hmm, okay.
All right.
Um, was that your only kind of inspiration maybe to horror writing, or did you branch out in different realms as well? Because I know Dragonbane was quite popular in Sweden, and a lot of also cult people mention it as one of the first kind of things they wrote for, or at least home scenarios.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Dragonbane, Drakar och Demoner, as it's called in Swedish. Yeah, that was definitely something we also played, and Mutant
Hmm.
Mm.
also, along with American and English role playing games as well. I mean, Vampire and um, Stormbringer. Um,
Mhm.
you know, Star Wars. So there was a lot of role playing going on at that time.
Mm.
But specifically the horror writing. I mean, I guess I'm an avid, consumer of of horror, or have been, I guess, at least in my early years, in my maybe in my formative years, I should say. Um, so I think, I mean, maybe that's where the interest. I think maybe though, when I look back at it, maybe Cult actually was the genesis of getting into horror, because that led to discovering. I mean, I'd heard of Lovecraft before, maybe because I have older brothers, but Clive Barker, getting into Clive Barker, getting into Lovecraft, um, all that stuff. It came from Cult. Yeah.
Mm. Cool. Fantastic.
Excellent. Um, I guess let's get into more of the nuts and bolts here of the interview series. Maybe talk about the Metropolis source book, and your contributions to it without being too, spoilery. But yeah, tell us your experience writing for it, and maybe a couple little tidbits from it.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, one thing that me and Petter, um, said really early on was that Metropolis is hard. It's hard to use Metropolis in gameplay, and it turned out to be hard to write for as well. Because I think for one thing, people use Metropolis in different ways. There's not a ton of background in the source material that's already written. And we wanted to stay away from there was a supplement written for, I can't remember what edition it was, maybe it was the second or third edition, that we didn't feel was right for Cult of Infinity Lost. So we wanted to do something else. We knew that. And one of the things that we saw as difficult was, why do characters go to Metropolis? What's the motivation?
Mhm.
I mean, because of course you can end up in Metropolis by chance.
Mhm.
The illusion could tear,
Mm-hmm.
and you know dangerous things can happen. But there's really, to make it more interesting, there should probably be more ways that you can interact with the city, and it's kind of mentioned in the core rule book that magicians go there, cults
Mhm.
have their interfaces with otherworldly beings and all that stuff, of course. But it's not really explored. So we wanted to explore that, and to also give characters a motivation
Mhm.
to actually go into Metropolis and continue their journey or story there. Because normally, in many games, when you end up in Metropolis, that's kind of when the game ends, or at least there's not much left.
Right.
So we wanted to make sure that we create a way for the GM to set up a story where you can start in Elysium and go, the entire way into Metropolis and continue your story in Metropolis.
Mhm.
Mm.
And for that, we created a set of well, the most efficient way we found was creating a set of factions that
Mm.
exists in Metropolis, but also in Metropolis, in Elysium, and in Metropolis. And these factions have interactions within Metropolis, also in Elysium. So there are connections between them. And there are connections between locations in Metropolis and other factions in Metropolis, and other powers that be. Um, and by doing this, you can set up a story using the framework that already exists in Cult via Dark Secrets to actually create a story that is going to take you further, or help the GM to take the story further for the characters. So that was one of our main ideas, to make it easier for the GM to tell stories in Metropolis. And of course, then also there's a lot of background material, like a lot of locations, for instance, like City of the Dead, the Machine City, but a bunch of new locations and regions, like the Obsidian Reach or the Drowned City. So there are a lot of those places that you can explore and hopefully work into your story as a GM. And of course, also we tried to, it's a fine line between having the eternal city seem just vast and dark and like a nothingness, versus having it, being an interesting place. So it was a really interesting, line to walk, to make sure it's alive, but it's not too alive. We don't want to populate Metropolis with a lot of people to make it more like a city. We'd rather try to make it interesting in places, and then create this vast space between them, basically. And for that also, we've developed, or we are developing, a set of rules to travel in Metropolis. That is going to be more like an experience rather than following a map, or saying you walk in a specific direction, because Metropolis is like, it should be like walking in a dream almost. So it should be more of an experience of this vastness and the sublime experience of seeing sights that you could never have imagined, basically.
Yeah.
You already mentioned locations. You mentioned a bit the traveling. What other tools, and obviously the lore and the background in itself about the locations, but what other tools can we expect, maybe? Because it sounds very interesting, and that given the list of contributors that are writing on this, which is a bit amazing to see. Yeah, what are some tools that we can expect from this collection or the source book?
Yeah, absolutely. Some other tools are a framework for making entranced communities. So the people of Metropolis that have, that are still there, what are they doing? How are they surviving? Who are they worshiping? To create interesting characters and interesting communities that you could interact with. There's also a framework of, there's an expansion of the framework on angels. So that's interesting. There's also a section on divine insights that you can acquire in Metropolis. So you can actually you can find these divine insights and be inspired towards the path to awakening, basically. There's also a framework letting you create. There there are these 7,777 hills with those an equal amount of temples. So there's a there's a framework of creating temples because there needs to be many. Can't
Hmm.
can't we can't make them all, so there's a framework instead of making those
Okay.
temples.
Right.
What else? There is a chapter explaining the interface between Elysium and Metropolis, creating
Hmm.
ways into Metropolis also.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so that are some
Very,
highlights.
very
Sounds
exciting.
ex yeah, very excited to read this source book.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
it's going to be massive for
yeah,
sure.
I
Sounds like
think
it.
that's what a lot of GMs especially have been probably waiting for to kind of have a bit more structure than this I think it's like
Yeah.
20 pages in the core book about Metropolis. That
Hmm.
felt a bit short, but yeah, I mean, I guess we just had to wait and suffer the torment of not knowing until now. Um,
Hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean it's been weighing. I mean, I know this as well as a GM. It's been weighing every word in the core rule book to try and like create stories that are exciting in
Yeah.
Metropolis.
yeah.
So yeah, I know the feeling.
Um,
Uh,
just-
oh, I think maybe we can switch gears a little bit and talk about your deep waters. Um, would you call it a scenario or a sort of a
I think
choose your own
it's
adventure novel? What would
Yeah,
you
yeah, it's in the
call
format
it?
of choose your own adventure novel. So
Hmm.
I don't know if people are if everyone is familiar with the term for your viewers. I mean, these
Hmm.
these books were back in the day in the 80s and 90s, they were very popular. So
Love them
yeah,
myself.
yeah,
same.
yeah, I had a lot of them growing up. So.
Hmm.
But just as a quick explanation, it's written as a novel, but you basically go from different sections in the book depending on what you choose as you read the book, basically. And you also in the beginning you actually in Deep Waters you create your character by choosing between two different backgrounds, and then you choose your attributes so you get the character creation as well, and then you're basically off to start playing.
All
Fantastic.
right.
Maybe on following up on Deep Waters, what was the inspiration for that? I mean, it is kind of a very unique choose your own adventure to bring it back as well, but especially for Cult, which we know can be dark and gruesome. Maybe there's a bit of insight. What inspired you to make this?
Yeah, it's actually, I mean, it's I wanted to write a campaign for Cult, because don't we all? So
Mm.
right. So that's what
Absolutely.
Yeah.
yeah. So that's why I wanted to do. And I asked Petter, and he was like, "Well, we have all this stuff. There's no way it's gonna, maybe, but
Yeah.
it's gonna take years." So, but he said that at that point he was like, "Yeah, but I mean, if you write it as a choose your own adventure novel, that would be something else. That would be something different, and it would also serve as a way for, I mean, both for seasoned Cult players to enjoy the world of Cult, obviously, but also for new players to see what Cult is about, because maybe you don't have
Mm,
a group that you can play with right away,
mm,
because maybe you're not sure who would be interested in playing Cult. So I mean, it's a really good way to introduce people to the both the system and the type of stories that you can tell in Cult.
mm,
Um, because it's very much a classic Cult story in Deep Waters. It's a story about repressed memories and strange disappearances, and there's glimpses into Metropolis and a journey through Inferno. There's ritual magic and a confrontation with the past, encounter with hellish creatures, all that good stuff.
Cool.
A bit of Dante Alighieri, it sounds like.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. Yeah. And on a more thematic level, it explores, whether you can trust your own memories. It explores an addiction to self-harm, and it explores the horror of losing those you love to insanity.
Mm.
So it does have some significant content warnings, let's put it this way.
Yes, yes,
Would be aware. Yeah, okay.
absolutely, yes.
Okay.
And as for inspiration, yeah, like I said, going back to the campaign that I wanted to write, I basically had one done. So I took elements from that campaign and made that into a choose your own adventure book, basically.
Oh, cool.
And then it's also loosely inspired by the story of Cain and Abel in some ways. So that's
Okay.
an interesting different tidbit, I guess.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I'm curious about, so it might be the process of like play testing a solo adventure is probably a little or a lot different than play testing a game that you play with others. What was that play testing process like? I mean, did you just hand it off to people and say like, give me your notes? And then maybe also a follow-up question for Metropolis Sourcebook. Have you used any of the locations or factions or other stuff in the Metropolis Sourcebook in any of your games that you're GMing?
Right. Yes. It's yeah, playtesting for Deep Waters was in different stages, handing it off to people to try and play it through. And one of the things with choose your own adventure novels is that, of course, it's going to have many parallel branches. It's going to have
Yeah.
the story can take different directions depending on your choices. So it can be hard to actually play test every possible situation that can occur, or every possible branch. So I think that was the most interesting learning experience, to try and keep everything together in parallel stories that evolves throughout the book. But I had great help from Gabe, who play tested, and also our editor, Jacqueline, who didn't play test, but of course read the whole thing through, and caught some inconsistencies, of course. Yeah. So that was pretty much the play testing and there was more people play testing Deep Waters as well. But for Metropolis, yes. Some locations from that campaign that I talked about ended up in Deep Waters and also ended up in Metropolis. So I got to reuse some of it, so that was good. But there's a lot of stuff that I think will be play tested very soon as we're getting closer to development. There's a lot of material at this point, but it needs to be more uniform
Right.
for we're going to be able to play test it. And that's also because we want to make sure that locations and regions and everything fits with the rule set of traveling that we're thinking of using, and also making sure that the regions are easily digested by a GM, so they can easily use them in their play, basically.
Cool. Fantastic. Given that that was a lot of information as well, and a lot of different aspects of it, where do you get all your inspiration from?
Yes. Yeah, that's a good question. I think, I think, I mean, um, I'm I mentioned that I've really only been writing in this capacity for the last 6 or 7 years. But I mean, in terms of creative endeavors, I'm a musician as well. So I've always played music and been in bands and done music production and all that stuff. And that goes back to the early teens. So I think, I mean, in many ways, that is music has been an inspiration. Um, Not necessarily that music, would tell me what kind of horror to write.
Mm.
It's not, I don't think that's how it works, but it's like to ignite that creative spark, I guess. Getting into the zone of being creative. I borrow a lot of the same. I use a lot of the same tools to be inspired,
Mm.
basically. Um, but I wouldn't say. I mean, and I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily inspired by a certain type of horror. I think maybe it's more like I get inspiration from mythology or religion,
Mm.
actually, or philosophy for that matter, because that's such a wealth of information, and I kind of feel like for horror to be to make sense in a way, and I don't mean sense in the sense that it's objective or in a reasoning way,
Hmm.
for it to make sense on a on an unconscious level. It's really important to have that connection to, for instance, mythology or emotion or
Hmm.
uh, I don't know, Jungian archetypes, something that makes your unconscious feel that it makes sense.
Hmm.
That, if you see what I mean,
Hmm.
because that's kind of because horror is so otherworldly in many
Mhm.
ways. I mean,
Yeah.
Cult especially. I mean, the whole mythos is very weird, but it makes sense on some level.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And I think it has to do it has something to do with the unconscious. It's symbols that we recognize. It's words that mean something on a deeper level. So
Hmm.
I find that very, very interesting.
Okay.
How do you describe the indescribable?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what
Hmm.
it's about. It's like these it's like a feeling rather than than something objective.
Hmm.
Mm. Are there any specific elements of horror that you also like to often go back to, fall back into, and use for your scenarios? Because you mentioned now the Jungian approach, basically the undescribable, the subconscious, but I mean, we in other interview with Matt Sanderson was pointed out that you don't want to repeat yourself. You want to exchange. You want to develop and flourish different
Hmm.
types of stories. Um, yeah.
Yeah, I think, I mean, again, I think mythology and religion is a really useful tool for me, at least,
Mhm.
um, for that. And I think, I mean, another extremely useful tool is the source book Beyond Darkness and Madness.
Mm.
If there's a theme that you want to explore, you can pull out the book and start looking through it. I think especially the chapter on the sublime
Mm.
is a really good. I mean that's really really useful, and especially for Metropolis, it has a lot of
Hmm.
that. The sublime, the horror of the sublime.
Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna have Jason Fryer as a
Oh, cool.
interviewee as well. So, um, yeah, definitely gonna
Talk with him.
delve into that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Hmm.
Are there maybe any special tidbits of the campaign that you personally also want to highlight that you really are excited about? Besides obviously your own contributions, but like maybe something that you're like, I'm really excited about this.
I think the oh, I can't remember what it's called now. The Borderlands.
Hmm.
I'm
Mm-hmm.
excited about that. I think it's really interesting um, to see, the world where the interface between Metropolis and Elysium,
Hmm.
and I think that's going
Yeah.
to be really interesting for
Hmm.
sure. And
Yeah.
and there's a lot of stuff that I don't know much about. The Scarlet Bride, for instance,
Hmm.
I've just heard Petter describe elements of it, and it sounds really great. And also the horror starters
Hmm.
sounds
Hmm.
really amazing. These really, you know, short and sometimes really mind-blowing, starters. I think that can be
Hmm.
extremely interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah, I was curious about how much the individual writers knew about the other projects of this campaign, but it sounds like you kind of only know the stuff that that you're working on. Maybe you
Yeah,
just hear Petter talking about it in the background, or
exactly. Yeah, yeah. I get to piece together with what Petra is telling me. So yeah.
yeah. If you have any perhaps advice for new writers or people who want to kind of flex their creative muscles, do you have any advice for those people?
Yeah, I think it would be don't wait. Don't wait till the right moment to write, because there's
Hmm.
never a right moment. And it's one of those things where you I've since I have two small children, I have very little time
Hmm.
consecutively to write or to do anything for that matter. But I found that half an hour or 5 minutes or 15 minutes, you can actually get some work done in that very short amount of time, which is interesting. So I always have my phone, and I always have Google Docs on my phone, basically on the first screen. So I just go into Google Docs and see what I can do, basically.
Hmm.
If I have
Yeah.
5 minutes, I might go in and see what was the last thing I wrote.
Hmm.
Can I edit it? Is there an idea here that I can explore? If I have a list of ideas, like, can I add some more words to it? Can I expand on something? So I think I think that's the best advice probably to just not second guess yourself and to get all the ideas out there because the first 10 ideas are going to be shit and then maybe the
Yeah.
11th is going to be fine. So
Hmm.
so you don't stop.
Progression of a little less shit, a little less shit.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
I think I found that through music that it's like you kind of just have
Hmm.
to get over that barrier of when it's not awkward anymore.
Yeah.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you're not doing it, then you're not practicing and you're
Mm,
not getting to where you need to be, right?
No, exactly. No, and I think many make the mistake of setting up I have the perfect space. I need to have my
Hmm.
perfect space with my perfect ancient typewriter and my glass of whiskey and you know and
Hmm.
and the perfect lighting, and that never happens. So,
Yeah.
or at least it doesn't for me. So for
I
me, it's
mean,
it's the phone on the commute train. So,
leave it to small kids to come and knock all your dreams of like the perfect writing
right, exactly.
scenario, right?
Uh, maybe in a couple of years.
Yeah.
good. Fantastic. Maybe as as we're reaching the end here, a couple last final thoughts. Maybe what would you like to give? Maybe yeah, GMs or anyone expecting this Kickstarter on the way, and maybe also what you've yourself learned throughout the experience writing for it.
Yeah, I guess the main message would be make a pledge. No, but yeah, what I learned, I think, yeah, there was a lot of um, again, I think going back to that creative thing that it's valuable to keep going and explore any and all ideas is I think some of the learnings, of course. Um, you know, yeah, what else? No, make a pledge. It's gonna be cool.
Yeah.
Indeed. Yeah, if you haven't looked at it, join the link below and take a look. There's fantastic stuff waiting in this amazing collection, and
And
thanks to all the other
all those
Kickstarter.
stretch goals too.
Yes, thanks to all the backers already. Pretty much, I think a year worth of reading material has been unlocked.
Yeah.
And some of the stuff is unique for the Kickstarter, which will not be in retail as well. So think about twice if you don't want to at least back something of it, because you might not get a chance otherwise. And yeah, I think with that, thank you very much, Torsten, to
Yes. Thank
for this
you.
fantastic interview and the insights to Metropolis and Deep Waters. The part of the deep realm. Now I'm getting mixed up here. The
Can
dark
edit that out.
realms and exactly. Um, but yeah, for the Dark Realms and Other Horrors Kickstarter on Cult Divinity Lost. So thank you very much and have a
Thanks.
fantastic evening and see everybody else for another interview soon.
Thank you so much for having me.